Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Application Committee. I'm Councillor Gerard Hargreaves and I'm one of the Vice Chairs of the Planning Committee and will be chairing our meeting this evening. To my right, I have my fellow councillors who will be listening to the applications and with myself will be making the decisions at the end of each application. To my left, we have council officers here to present the cases and answer questions, and a planning lawyer and the governor's team down there monitoring and doing the minutes. We have a list of applications with speakers this evening. So what I plan to do is to take those applications that have speakers first and then go on to the applications that don't have speakers. So the running order for tonight will be, we will start with 61 Cambridge Gardens, and the entrance to South Kent Station, and former New Church Centre building, Pembridge Villas, and Cromwell Road, Addison Road, basement flat of Ladbroke Grove, Kensington Park Road, St Charles Primary School, and the public house at Smith Street. That will be the order of our proceedings this evening. I just have to do some formal business before we actually get into the applications. So item number 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Idris.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would like. I would need to recuse myself from item 2 in the order, which is the entrance to South Kensington Station, because I have written a letter of objection to that one.
Okay, thank you. Any other declarations? Okay, then we go now to the reports to the committee. So we start with 61 Cambridge Gardens, and who's going to present that, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So it's an application before you for 61 Cambridge Gardens, and the proposal is for the construction of a basement and ground floor commercial building. So there's been 7 letters of objection received in regard to this planning application, and the concerns relate to highways impacts, construction impacts, design and appearance, and the lack of community benefit. So on the screen now is a site location plan and an aerial view. The site is located to the rear of 61 Cambridge Gardens, and it's on the corner of Moulton Road and Moulton Mews. The application site is separated from the rear of 61 Cambridge Gardens by a 2.3 metre high rear garden wall and is laid out as an area of hard landscaping currently. The site is located within the Oxford Gardens Conservation Area, and the proposal is for a single-storey building plus single-storey basement to contain a commercial unit described as an office space with an internal floor area of 84 square metres. There is a bit of planning history to this scheme, and there was a recently refused planning application and an upheld appeal, although this was for a 2-storey plus basement high building, and the application refused on the impact that would have had to living conditions. So this is some street scene views. You can see the Moulton Mews and... Oh, sorry. Yeah, of course.
To the microphone.
A bit nearer.
Thanks.
Is this better? Yeah. So some street scene views here. You can see that the rear of the garden and the garden wall separating it from 61 Cambridge Gardens, and then the westway to the left of the top picture and the commercial units that sit underneath that currently. This is existing and proposed. So on the right you can see the proposed for the single-storey plus basement, and for the office building with a garage attached to it for off-street parking associated with the office building. Some elevational views here. So the main considerations would be the impact to the conservation area and impact to living conditions. The use of the building is considered acceptable in this location and accords with policy CF5. And in regard to the conservation area and townscape impacts, it's considered that the development would be low-rise in scale and the built form would be simple and would support a secondary scale on this side of the street. So in regard to living conditions, it's considered that the single-storey nature of the building and the angle, size and positioning of the proposed windows and roof lights of the main roof would not give rise to an unacceptable level of overlooking or light spillage. It's considered that the office use by its nature and size would be compatible in a residential area and would not result in a significant noise disturbance to neighbouring occupiers. The basement would be single-storey and under the footprint of the main building with no external manifestations and is considered to be in accordance with the Local Plan Policy CL7. The proposal is the proposal is accompanied by a flood risk assessment, and SUDS would ensure compliance with the relevant drainage policies. Highways officers have reviewed the application and raised no objections subject to conditions in relation to highway safety, and construction would be followed up with a construction traffic management plan, and that's considered to be acceptable. So that concludes my presentation, and the officer's recommendation is to grant permission subject to the conditions set out in the officer's report.
Thank you very much. We do have speakers for this, so I'd ask Mr. Linton. You, sir? Okay, you have 3 minutes to speak. When you're ready, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity of talking with you. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. This is actually the third occasion I think I've come to the committee with objections for building on this land, which essentially, as you said, is what was the back garden of 61 Cambridge Gardens. One of my principal concerns, I'm here to represent the 4 owners and residents of the 4 flats that constitute Cambridge Gardens, and also business owners on Moulton Road, BSG Garages, Kensington Auto Care and Lords, all of whom will be impacted with that. And I'm actually a resident owner of Cambridge Gardens myself. So the application, I know it is for a single story, but essentially it's not vastly different to that which we've seen before. It's just that the building is just a little bit lower in terms of its overall height. And from our perspective, it still does constitute a degree of a sense of enclosure. And it's also for a commercial use, which we don't understand how that's compatible with the residential area. We've talked about precedent before at this meeting and the fact that precedent doesn't exist, but I've just heard the idea that there are commercial properties already along Moulton Road underneath the Westway, so that perhaps does set a precedent, but this is a back garden. What concerns me is that all of the back gardens along Moulton Road would then, it sort of opens the door for development of all of those back gardens if we progress with this. It was formerly a parking space for 4 or 5 cars, and it's only recently, since the applicant has owned the land, that it's actually been allowed to deteriorate to the condition that we see it in now. It was actually used by the applicant for tipping the builder's waste that he's got there, and has now been added to with people fly tipping, which has caused us quite a considerable problem and with vermin. Of course, that's not a reason for or justification for granting a planning application. That should be addressed with an enforcement order, and we'd like to bear that in mind. The area was quite satisfactory up until recently. So the application, as I say, remains with fairly high walls, creating a sense of enclosure. It's quite close to the existing house. It's a very significantly deep basement excavation, which covers the whole of the footprint of that land. And that, for us, is a considerable concern because it's close to the house, and we're concerned about the disruption it will cause, which I'll come to in a moment, but also the risk of the introduction of issues to the structural integrity of Cambridge Gardens itself, because there have been issues with subsidence in the past. There's also the very significant issue of the loss of wildlife and the damage that it's going to cause to the biodiversity of the area, because the boundary and the adjacent area has a number of trees and bushes which are used by nesting birds every year. And I don't think this has been properly considered. And of course, we need to consider with that the possibility of other applications for building on other gardens, and this would be inconsistent with the RBKC Biodiversity Action Plan that you've got in place. So we don't really need commercial permit.
Ask you to come to a close.
I thought it was 3 minutes, was it?
3 minutes and 11 seconds now, sir.
Okay, so let me say that from the disruption point of view, having reviewed the traffic management plan, we know that isn't workable. It will cause enormous disruption on Moulton Road. And Lords and the garages have all advised that they would almost likely have to let people go as a consequence, which will cause a loss of jobs for local community whilst the construction is going on. Thank you very much for your time and listening.
Thank you. So now we turn to the applicant, Mr.
Thank you.
Wagner or Mr. Spiteri, who's going to speak. You've got 3 minutes between the two. I will give you 3 minutes and 35 seconds, so it's fair each way.
Right, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep, I'm Philip Wagner. I'm the architect and the agent. I'm just here really to answer any technical questions should they arise, but I'm going to hand over to George Spiteri on behalf of the applicant.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak here. Firstly, the objector has not really raised any new issues. I am not the person who has been dumping waste on the site, and the land was previously used 6 years ago for parking, and the previous tenant who rented it had his car set on fire when he asked local people not to park there. It wasn't a sustainable condition. All of his comments, or either personal or irrelevant comments, were fully addressed in the planning officer's report, which is one of the longest and most thorough reports I've ever seen, particularly for a very small site. The officers comprehensively answered all of the objections in planning terms and made a resound conclusion that there is no valid reason for refusing this application. The truth is, it has been a very long and hard road to get to this position. The inspectorate at the appeal made it very clear there is only one reason why we were refused permission before, and that is the sense of enclosure caused by a first floor. We have accepted and applied the inspectorate's comments and removed the first floor, therefore removing any reason why the application can be refused. Various departments in the council have seen and supported this application, and it is repeatedly described as a public benefit. It increases car parking, improves road safety, creates employment, benefits conservation, stops fly tipping, which is a health hazard, and invokes criminal activity. This corner is labelled on the police website as a severe crime hotspot. In the last 6 months, the police have reported 50 crimes on Malton Mews, consisting of sexual assault, criminal damage, arson, robbery, violence and sexual offences, burglary, mugging, car theft, bike theft, indecent exposure, drug abuse, and other. The building will have lighting and security cameras on it, which is widely known to drastically reduce crime in urban areas. There is no doubt, if you speak to anybody who actually uses the street, including all of the employees at Lords and the mechanics, they are all in support of this application. The current situation is ugly, unsafe, and unacceptable. We have all learnt a lot of things for a very long and painful process, but we have accepted the inspectorate's decision and addressed the one and only reason for refusal by removing that first floor. I really hope you see through the objector's comments and make the right decision here by granting permission. It is something the public wants, and it will be a safer, healthier, and more desirable location, which is something the local community desperately needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will now open it to members of the committee to ask any questions of the speakers. Who have got some questions? Councillor Idris?
Thank you, Chair. My question is to the applicant. In developing this site, do you need to remove any trees or a biodiversity habitat?
No, it's a concrete floor, so it's currently just a slab of concrete.
Will your development create any damage for the gardens of number 61 Cambridge?
No, there's been a tree report produced for this application and the previous ones which explain that it isn't going to impact anything in terms of environmental impact or sound or light at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My question to the objector, do you feel there is any damage to your garden and garden space, and how?
Well, one has to remember this is quite a deep excavation right up to the boundary, of the garden. So that deep excavation is going to cut through the roots of all of the trees that are on the boundary there. So it's impossible that they could continue to live. So we'll lose the trees that back on to the piece of land for which the application exists on the boundary at the back of the house and the boundary that goes along the side of the house as well. So it's absurd to suggest that there won't be any damage or death to the trees and the biodiversity there as a consequence. Thank you.
How many trees do you have now?
Oh, there's at least half a dozen. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff growing there. You know, there's a lot, and it's a feature of the area, which is part, principal part of the objection.
Okay,
You know, thank you.
thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Lloyd? North?
Thank you, Chair. Just one thing I picked up from the objectors to say that the objectors represent Lords, and yet the applicant said that Lords were okay with this. Can I just ask both parties, starting with the objectors, to clarify that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, if it's recorded amongst the objections,
Yes.
a letter from Lords saying they object to it going ahead. The manager there at Lords, and he has done all the way through the different application processes we've contested, as indeed Ernie did, who was the owner of New Line as it was, and he had very, very grave concerns when he owned the business.
Thank you. Yes, I can see 2 letters from Kevin Beecher. Can I ask the applicant about that?
Yeah, that's the owner of the company who just has a dominant control of the monopoly on the street, shall we say. But every employee who's there, and in fact the last application had, I think, 18 letters of support, most of which came from Lords. And we were told then that there weren't any, but they were all threatened by the owner to try and get them to revoke their letters of support, which is why nobody's written this time. And they said, well, if they don't listen then. But the resounding decision for anyone who actually works there, including the mechanics, is that they all support it because it's just a horrible situation. And on the trees note, there's an existing foundation for the garden wall, which means we're not doing any damage to any of the trees because it's already fully covered in concrete and got a deep foundation already. Thank you.
Councillor Benton?
Thank you, Chair. Been somewhat, my first question has actually just been somewhat covered, so I'll skip over it. And I'll ask Mr. Linton, you made some, you sort of touched on, I think, particularly the CTMP, you know, the plans for construction not really working, and I don't think you had much of a chance to elaborate. So I'll just give you the opportunity to say what your concerns are there.
Well, thank you very much indeed. So what you've got to imagine is that this is 4 or 5 car parking spaces, all of which is completely part of the superstructure of the new building. So that excavation is going to go down over the entire footprint of that building. So you've got no opportunities for storage of any materials coming in or out. That's point number 1, which is, you know, anyone can write down on a piece of paper. I mean, I used to be in construction myself in a previous life, and I'm looking at that job and knowing it will be horrendous. So you've got a large number of lorries that can be taking muck away from there. I calculated it to be around 25. They've got to sit there whilst they're being loaded, you know. So that's going to block the road completely for hours whilst that's going on. Then when your muck away is done, you've got all your materials starting to come back in again, shuttering, concrete. You know, that road is the angle of that corner is a complete right angle. But there are near collisions that happen there on a regular basis with people trying to get round the corner. If you try and block off the road, you've got another issue. The other thing is there's an ambulance station down the end of the road. The ambulances use both ends of Moulton Road to go in and out. And if you close off one end of Moulton Road, as a consequence of the lorries being there, you've got another issue at the other end of Moulton Road, where you've got other deliveries that are people trying to get into Lords and the garages as well. So this is another issue that's going to impact people. Pedestrian usage and 3 disabled parking bays, which will be rendered inaccessible as well. So the disruption is absolutely enormous. And the idea of doing a basement excavation there is, to me, you know, it beggars belief in terms of it being practical to move forwards for that particular area. It's not something I think that what one would ordinarily expect to be going on in a residential area. Does that help a little? Thank you.
It does, thank you. I have some follow-ups for the officers. Thank you.
Councillor McIver?
Good evening. Question to objectors. We've heard reference to the planning inspector's previous report supporting refusal. We've also heard the applicant say and I assume you've read this inspector's report when it came out. Is there anything other than the extra one-storey height in that inspector's report that you feel we should be aware of when it comes to looking at this application in front of us? Because obviously it's material, what the inspector has said.
So I think the inspectorate was focused on the sense of enclosure. I think what we've discussed here in terms of the precedent that's setting for developing back gardens is an issue that needs proper consideration, most importantly. And I think that was also an item that was put forward for consideration, because there are a number of back gardens down there, and once you've got one that's being developed, there's no reason to stop anyone developing any of them, because there is a precedent set there.
Thank you, Mr. Linton. I know this area very well. How long has that not been part, that plot of land has not been part of the garden? Because we refer to it as part of the garden, but actually technically it's not part of the garden anymore, is it?
It is. No, I'm referring to it as it's on the footprint of where the garden was, yeah, and it was a car parking space for up until, I don't know, I think the applicant quoted 5 years ago, I think it was a car parking space for a long period of time. So it is just recently that it's been considered or being used, you know, as for a tipping area at the moment. Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Benton, did you say you had another? Okay. An opportunity for the, sorry, Councillor Regis. You're getting in early. We now give an opportunity for the councillors to ask members, the officers, for any technical information. Councillor Waller. Interest.
Thank you, Chair. My question is actually a follow-up from what the Chair just asked. Will this unit have a different address, or is it going to be still 61 Cambridge?
That would be a matter that would be taken up after planning and wouldn't be a consideration of the case in that regard, but it is considered a separate site for the purposes of this application, and it's titled land to the rear of. Sorry, can you not hear me?
So that's going to be, if you could get close to the microphone so I can hear you, sorry. I can't hear you very well.
So I believe that when you create a new address, then that goes through a separate process that's not part of the planning process. So for the purposes of this application, the red line boundary is what you're considering, and that is titled in the report as land to the rear of 61 Cambridge Gardens.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Questions of officers? Councillor Mackover.
Yeah, officers, looking at the hand-drawn drawings put in this pack and looking at the objectors who raised the question of a 4.3 metre basement depth, what have you measured the basement depth as? It certainly looks a lot deeper than the ground to first floor or ground to roof space.
Yeah, we have clarified that it is less than 4 metres, so it does fulfil the requirements of our policy in that regard, and it is considered just to be a single-storey basement. I think due to the land levels, it ranges between kind of 3.7 and 3.8 metres.
And may I just check on policy, the recommended, without swimming pools or other things, what's the normal recommended floor depth of basement that is in policy?
I'm just going to pull that up so I can properly clarify that for you.
Chairman, to save time, perhaps I could just come in at that point. Policy CL7 restricts basements to a single storey, and within the supporting text of the policy, we identify that a 3 to 4 metre floor to ceiling height is considered a single storey. So as Jessica has identified, this is within that range that, that the policy itself suggests is a single storey.
Benton?
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. Firstly, I'm probably just being a bit slow here. So in terms of the critical drainage area and the response that's been given by officers is that the proposed use would not fall within the definition of vulnerable development for the purposes of the local plan. And I suppose I just want you to tell me more about that, because there are, it seems, pretty serious concerns about the effect of, like, we've had some pretty serious floods, and they only seem to be getting worse over the last 5 years. So how are you going to make me feel better about that?
Yeah, so the application has been accompanied by a flood risk assessment and a sustainable urban drainage strategy, which officers have reviewed, and we consider that that would ensure compliance with the local plan policies and prevent those flooding issues you've mentioned. And we've also recommended conditions 12 and 14 in accordance with that to require further details to be submitted.
Okay, so okay, I just feel like a lot has changed in terms of how we look at flood risk in the last few years. So I suppose I'm not entirely, my fears aren't entirely allayed. But thank you for answering that. And I have another quick one, which is to follow up on what the objector, Mr. Linton, was saying about access, about the CTMP during, and especially, and as well points out, I mean, yes, as the response says, there's more than one way to get to Ladbroke Grove. Having said that, you've got an ambulance service there, and being able to get in from both sides, I imagine, would probably could potentially make a serious difference to, emergency services in the area. So just could you speak a little about that, please?
Yeah, of course. So with the application was submitted a draft construction traffic management plan, which has been reviewed by the transport officer and considered acceptable. They've taken into consideration the objections as well, which did raise issues about the ambulance stations. They've taken that into consideration. And they've also recommended condition 7, which is the submission of a final construction traffic management plan prior to the start of development. And they've also made a point that due to the excavation that's proposed next to the highway, that they would also require the need for highways technical approval, which is separate to planning permission. So.
Okay, thank you.
The ambulance issue was one of the issues on the CTMP. This is a really tight junction, and it's not just a junction, it's the angle of the turn opposite the council offices on that corner there. Are we really satisfied that in this tight corner, with a point about excavation and taking out all the muck, that lorries are going to be able to go in and out of there? How's that going to work?
I have to admit I'm not a highways officer, but they have reviewed this application and they are satisfied with that draft construction management plan, and they've raised no objection based on the information that's been submitted, and we do have that additional condition to pick up post decision if the members were minded to grant permission. So I think taking that into context, we would have sufficient information to demonstrate that there wouldn't be a materially harmful impact as a result of the construction.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the officers? Councillor Macover.
I noticed that the whole building has a flat roof, and if access or use was made of that flat roof, it would be very disturbing for residents. Shouldn't there be a condition, or would it be right to put a condition on that, or able to put a condition on it if it was going that direction, to prevent any use of that flat roof at all?
if members were minded to approve the application, then that would be within your remit to impose a condition to restrict the use of that flat roof as a roof terrace. Although I would say that they would require extra permission to put in an access to that roof, railings to make it safe and secure, and also there's 2 large roof lights that currently occupy that roof space. There would be limited area of the roof to use as a roof terrace, but you are able to impose a condition if you were so minded to restrict that.
Can I just pick up on another question, and Mr. Linton, which answered. This is about the difference between the application now and the one that went to appeal and the judgment by the inspectorate. The key judgment was about the second story. Was there anything else from the officer's point of view in that report that is worth reflecting on that's not covered in this application, please?
No, thank you, Chairman. No, there wouldn't be anything further. The main issue that was identified by the inspector as part of that appeal, and the reason it was dismissed, was the impact on living conditions by virtue of the second story. So we feel that all that issue in particular has been addressed, and there was nothing more material within the inspector's report to consider.
Mr. Lomas, do you have anything to comment on that?
Nothing in addition in relation to the inspector's decision. Well, let me make my point. I think something that members of the committee need to have in mind is that within planning, consistency in decision making is important and must be adhered to. The 2021 application was refused on living conditions, sense of enclosure, no other reasons for refusal. That was tested at appeal and dismissed, and the inspector was very clear about what aspects of the scheme were unacceptable in terms of sense of enclosure. And in making your decision tonight, bearing in mind, first of all, the council's decision to refuse last time and what those reasons were, and then the inspector's decision as a material consideration, you have to have, I would say, significant regard to consistency in decision making. And obviously there's been a lot of conversation tonight about other issues, but they are not new issues. They have been considered before, and they have not formed a reason for refusal either in the last application by the council or by the planning inspector. So you need to have that in your mind when you're making the decision tonight.
Thank you. And I think it is now time for us to come to a decision. So members will see that it is recommended to grant planning permission with the conditions listed in section 8 of this report. All those in favour of that recommendation, please raise their hands. You would like the roof condition to be included? Okay, second that.
Can we just take the vote again?
Yeah, can you first of all then propose the roof terrace?
I'd like to propose a condition that prevents any use of the roof at any time and by any means to protect the immunity of other residents.
Is there a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second.
Councillor North. Okay. So with that added condition, the recommendation to grant planning permission, those in favour, with that added condition, those in favour, please raise their hands. Those against, please raise their hand. Any abstentions? That is granted. Thank you very much. We now move on to the entrance at South Kensington Tube Station. Who is going to present that?
Thank you, Chairman. That will be me. So before members is an application for the installation of an archway to the entrance of the South Kensington Underground Station, located opposite Hyde Park Chapel and at 69 Exhibition Road. Is that correct? So on screen now is an aerial photo with a red dot which marks the specific entrance that this application is made in relation to. And here is a street scene photo with a red box marking the exact entrance. You can see here that it's onto the main road in front of the site, next to the Science Museum and adjacent to it. This is a further view of the entrance as it currently is. So South Kensington Station and South Kensington Subway are Grade 2 listed, and this entranceway along Exhibition Road forms part of that listing. So this is considered to be Grade 2 listed as well. So the proposal relates to the installation of a structure to create a secondary symbolic roof which would allow the Comanian community to use South Kensington Station and to access the wider underground network. The proposed structure would consist of slim metal fins painted in black and fixed only through the troughs of the rusticated stonework. The structure would be set out from the wall. Informative text is proposed on the inside of the structure which would provide information of the need for the structure and the purpose of it. So you can see here the entrance and the fins that would protrude out. So one to the left would protrude out by approximately 300 millimeters, and the one to the right would protrude out by just over 1,000 millimeters. This is an elevational view. You can see the text plaque that's affixed to the fin, the larger fin on the right-hand side, and the fixings that would fix this to the wall through the gaps within the stonework. And this is a zoomed in photo on the right hand side, sorry, a sectional drawing. You can see how the structure would be affixed to the wall through these fixings. It's considered that the proposed development would have a very limited impact upon pedestrian movement due to the limited depth of the structure onto the public pavement, and that the proposals are therefore not expected to create any pedestrian traffic or impact upon highway operation and safety at Exhibition Road or surrounding streets. And the Council's Highways Officer has raised no objection to this proposal. The decisive issues are considered to be the impact on the heritage significance of the Grade 2 listed building, and whether any public benefits arising from the proposal would outweigh any harm identified to the listed building. In relation to the special architectural interest of the listed building, there would be a degree of harm by adding a new structure to this entrance. However, given the distance and degree of removal from the most historic parts of the structure, and given that it relates to the later extension, this weight would be considered to be less than substantial at the lower end. Therefore, following the requirements of the MPPF, the less than substantial harm is likely to occur in relation to the listed building and conservation area, and this needs to be balanced against any public benefits of the proposal. The proposed development would bring significant benefits to the group in terms of accessing the South Kensington area and allowing access to other areas of London within the underground lines, and it would give this community that benefit. So the need for this, I should have mentioned, is that due to the Science Museum and the underground entrances sharing the same roof at present, the members of this particular faith are unable to use South Kensington Station and any underground line that passes through it. Therefore, the public benefit is associated with providing this access. Officers consider that the proposals would cause less than substantial harm to the Grade 2 listed heritage asset and to the character and appearance of the conservation area. However, it is considered that the public benefits arising from the proposal would outweigh this harm. As such, officers recommend that this application for planning permission and listed building consent is granted for the reasons set out in the officer's report.
Thank you very much. We do have some speakers on this, so I'd now like to ask Mr. Francesco Brenta. Yes, sir, you've got 3 minutes. You're objecting to this, so you've got 3 minutes when you're ready, please.
My name is Francesco Brenta, and I'm a member of the Knightsbridge Association Planning and Conservation Committee. Thank you for inviting me to speak. The officers recommending this application for approval say that the proposed development would result in less than substantial harm to the special historic interest of the Grade 2 listed South Kensington Station, of which the application site forms a part, and goes on to say the public benefits to the Kohanim community outweigh the less than substantial harm upon the listed building and should be granted. The association maintains that the proposal does do significant harm both to the setting of the listed Science Museum building and the Dyson building adjoining it, and it neither enhances nor preserves the Queensgate conservation area. The black structure is unsympathetic and alien to the listed building and conservation area. It also impedes the pedestrian flow by jutting out about 1.2 meters from the wall of the building into the public highway. In addition, the text on the tall black metal panel could be unsettling to the general public who will not be able to decipher it. Has the committee been able to read the translation of the text for the panel? Have you read the text? I'll quickly read a quick excerpt. A Cohen, a person of priestly lineage, is forbidden to allow himself to become contaminated with negative spiritual forces, such as those emanating from a corpse. It goes on along these lines. Members of the committee will know that particularly this side of Exhibition Road is crowded, in fact overcrowded for most parts of the day, with pedestrians streaming both ways to and from South Kensington Station, the museums, the parks, and Albert Hall. Beyond actual planning considerations, accommodating such a specific religious needs of one small group, there are 1,500 families, according to the documents, outside non-religious buildings would set an unfortunate precedent for other faiths to rightfully demand accommodation of their own specific needs in the public realm. London and the country as a whole believe in freedom and tolerance of all faiths, but no specific faith should be allowed to ask for special concessions with regard to attaching structures onto public buildings within public spaces. May I also say that nowhere has the association seen a compelling or indeed any reason why members of the group have to use this specific entrance to South Kensington Tube Station. Indeed, there are many others available, much closer to the platforms. The Knightsbridge Association respectfully asks that the application is therefore refused.
Thank you very much. Now I have speakers from the applicant, Mr. Joel Stern. There's three of you speaking. Who's going to? You've got 3 minutes in total.
I'm the agent of the application. I'm here merely to respond to technical questions as I worked alongside with officers for the past year or so. I would like to introduce Rabbi Duner, is the Chief Rabbi and the Vice President of the Union of the Orthodox Hebrew Congregation, the largest Orthodox Jewish community in Europe, and the one representing all of the Hasidic community in London. As well, I have here two rabbis of the Committee of Mishmeret HaKohanim, to my right and to my left. So, Rabbi Duner.
Thank you for allowing us to come. With a few words of our previous speaker, I'm afraid to tell him that it's not the entrance to Kensington, but it's the full underground anywhere which we can't go in. It's the overground also we can't go in, and many bridges in London. If I have longer later to explain how this works, I can explain it. But if we understand that a microbe from China can come to England, then you'll understand that something from a small place here can go around all the underground stations. We will not be able to use, more than 1,500 people will not be able to use the underground. It is a convenience, correctly so. We can't demand, but I can only say we have many precedents. Many hospitals have adjusted for us because there are some corpses there. We've never ever met any resistance. All through my years, I'm born in England, I've been all my years in England, we've seen many changes, whether the police needed a barrier, whether you need an extra traffic light, whether there's a no sign, whether there's a no entry, it's happening all the time. Yes, we'll make a slight change in a wonderful listed building, we'll put a nice notice. Perhaps the wording of that particular notice is a little bit frightening, spirits and that. We'll find a very nice text that will allow people tourists to come along and see, wow, this has been changed, this is something very interesting. It does stick out a little bit. We all walk through the streets regularly and find some extra bollards there. None of us have had a sleepless night over it. So we are all very abiding law citizens. We are careful not to demand things which are not our rights, but we feel that this particular part, not to use all undergrounds, all overgrounds, all tourists who come here of that type can't use overground. We feel it's something that is a shtickle, it's a must. I had a teacher when I was a young boy. He was a soldier in the Boer War, which was a long time ago, and he used to drum into us. He was a very, very big patriot. He said, England looks after all its citizens. We are citizens, and we'd like to understand that you look after us in a pleasant way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So now an opportunity for the panel to ask any questions of the speakers. Councillor Macover.
Thank you for these presentations. Just some questions first, because I'm looking at the harm and then at the public benefit, which is the only thing that we can really do up here. We're not sort of experts at anything else. So in that, just the structure itself, what's the weight of the structure?
It wasn't calculated at this stage, but it's going to be lightweight material. Lightweight material, aluminium.
Yeah, I mean, okay. We've been shown a picture of how it will be supported, and in the text of the officer's report, it says that the fixings will be made in the mortar between the blocks. I've been to this station entrance many, many times, and I went back to look at the space between the blocks, and that is 1 to 2 millimeters. And I don't know a fixing that can hold a metal structure where it's just going into the mortar. So can you let me know if there's some special sort of fixing, or whether this actually, because it talks about the grooves, whether this will be drilled into the stones itself?
It's not going to be drilled into the stones, because we had an engineering firm look at it. I don't have the report in front of it, but it will work, that it will we will not have to drill into the stones. We understand the importance of it.
Okay. Next question, just reading through things. We've heard the sign being discussed, and obviously that is quite prominent, and the sign is not needed for the structure to have its effect, is it? The sign is just offered for information. Just checking that.
That's correct. The sign is not needed, but this was discussed throughout the pre-app meetings that will be may be beneficial, that people shouldn't just bump into a structure, rather have some kind of explanation, like why this monument or this place is there.
Okay. And just on the public benefits side, I'm sorry if I keep asking these quick, but just that's, we're looking at the other side of the equation. We've heard the number, so it's the Kohanim from your group. What percentage of your group is actually are the priests or Kohen? Because it's not everybody; it's a sort of minority, right?
Yes. When we say Kohanim, now if the head of the family is a Kohen, then all the family are included. Now, there's children and grandchildren, and they want to go on an outing somewhere, then they can't go. So we are all included. I'm not a Kohen, but I've got a brother-in-law who's a Kohen, and then if he can't come with me, we are really all affected by it.
Yeah, so, but the actual people who
the amount of
can't go through that entrance.
The amount of
what proportion of your members are Kohanim?
It's definitely well below 50%. They're well below, probably.
Yeah, because the number in the letter I saw was 1,500.
That might be Kohanim, but I was saying we're all affected because we can't go with them. They can't come with us. The families are very broken over it, that they can't join in. So somewhere it's an attack. Not attack is the wrong word. It's affected the whole
just
community.
checking, because my understanding is obviously very patchy on this, but you're saying that a school child or a woman they're also affected?
Even a baby can't go with, funnily enough. Even the small baby cannot be taken with.
Right, thank you.
I don't want to get personal, but there's a question about a pregnant lady with a baby inside, but that's all right. But that's been discussed. Even babies are affected, correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Benton.
Thank you, Chair. just a little bit more about the sign. And I mean, if you just people indulge me for just 1 second. I think, you know, when I was a kid, we didn't have prayer rooms in multi-faith prayer rooms everywhere we do now. I think I'm perfectly happy to say that we can make, you know, we can make these sorts of concessions in public spaces. My question is to the applicants. How would it be for you if you were to sort of consult on the final message that's going to sort of go up? Because it feels like there's a lot of I mean, I don't know what it means, and it sounds a lot of the objectors may or may not know, and there's going to be a lot of sort of maybe hearsay around it. But what would it be like to actually directly, you know, consult before, or, you know, have the approval of somebody outside, that it's not something that's going to upset too many people, that sort of thing? Would that be, would you be amenable to that sort of condition?
No problem at all. The message, it did sound a little bit, so, you know, go, dead people, their spirits, doesn't sound good. We'll make the nicest message, whatever you like. You can choose, we can choose, it's no problem. There's a building and the message, it's 2 items. There's one, the building and the message, not a problem at all. No, will also be all right.
Okay, great.
I just want to add on a small point, is the message was actually requested by the council, so we worked together with the officers to get to that message, but I'm sure you can add on a condition to reword or rechange the message. I don't think it's a binding.
Fantastic. I mean, I'm just really asking in terms of, yes, consulting with anyone that does object or anything like that, you know, so that, and I understand as well, you know, consulting with the council going into it, you know, it would be nice to have as many people understand it as possible, right, I would imagine. But anyway, I'm digressing. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor North.
Yes, to the applicants. You'll see the overwhelming information and objections from many resident associations, the 3 ward councillors and residents groups. You will understand there's a sensitivity to attaching any structure to a listed building, especially in such a sensitive area. Had you considered any other ways that this could be done rather than attaching it to the listed building?
Yeah, we are aware that everything in life is pros and cons, that's correct. We know what a listed building is. We've had in our area many listed buildings which we've been refused, but when it was presented to the council, the importance of it all, to weigh up listed and not listed, and the importance of the citizens who actually live there. I mean, listed is passed, which is very important, and residents are president, and if we weigh it all up, we'll see that we think that the residents' ability to use all the facilities overweighs and overrides the listed history.
I just want to add on a point to your question, Councillor. We did weigh in, so this application started well over a year ago, where we consulted with TfL. We went through quite till we got to the right place where we have to, and the best way was not to put it actually on the ground, was actually to move it away a bit from the ground. So this was not our choice. It was a choice with Rabinko. We're happy about it, but the first choice would have, of course, been on the ground, but we were advised not to.
Any further questions of the speakers? Okay, any questions for the officers, please? Councillor Mackover.
I suppose this is just a matter of how, as users, we use these stations. But if anyone was to put, I'm just thinking of reflecting on what Knightsbridge Association has said, but also what normal users of any sort of entrances. I've used that entrance myself for many years, and something that sticks out, black, at night, by 1.2 meters, is going to be, and at that height, is going to be a very substantial blockage to the normal flow of people. And I can't think of any other structure on our pavements which is like that. So as officers, you probably can't comment on what steps highways officers have taken to consider that it isn't an obstruction. But I can imagine people cycling, because there are lots of cycles there, or on scooters, or just trying to avoid other people, or just looking at their phones, making their way into that entrance, who may cause harm banging into a black metal structure at night. I don't know whether that's been particularly considered by highways officers.
Thank you. The Transport and Highways officers have commented on this application and would have taken into consideration impacts on pedestrian movement and flows and obstructions from the proposed structure, and they've raised no objection to the application. Likewise, we've consulted with TfL and they've not commented on the application either.
Any further, Councillor North?
Yes, could I just ask about, I get this is an on-balance decision. When you are considering a structure like this in a conservation area and attached to a listed building, you'd normally expect it to add value in some way to either the conservation area or the listed building. Can you explain how this does?
Of course. So the test is whether it preserves or enhances the conservation area, and the report does acknowledge that there would be some harm to the conservation area as a result of the proposal, and then this is put into the balance that we've been talking about with the less of substantial harm and the public benefit. So it has been identified as causing less than substantial harm to the conservation area, along with that of the listed buildings. That has been taken into consideration in the weighting exercise.
Just looking at the objectors, most of the institutions around there, so I'm looking at Imperial College, Exhibition Road Culture Group, and other groups on South Kensington, on Exhibition Road, are objecting to it. How much were they involved in, do you know, in the discussions that have led to these plans coming to us? The whole dilemma here, isn't it? This is an incredibly busy highway of people, and we're putting an obstruction, in effect, on that road. And we've had comments from the institutions that are on that road. Have we any sense of what their feeling is and why we wouldn't take that as such?
Thank you, Chairman. So the objections that have been made in response to the application would have been taken into consideration by the officer, and they will have been addressed within the officer's report if they have a material planning consideration attached to them. And the officer has deemed that this application is acceptable to grant, subject to those objections being taken into consideration. As to their knowledge of involvement of application discussions, they would have seen the application documents that the officers have made a recommendation based upon, and they would have seen the information that's submitted as part of the application. However, they would not have been party to any pre-application discussions as per.
Do you want to say something?
Yes, please, Chairman. Thank you. I just not specifically in response to your question, but I noted that, similar to the question from Councillor Mackover, you mentioned obstruction of the highway, and I just thought it would be worth, Jessica, if you could bring up your presentation and the slide showing the photograph with the entrance to the station, just so members can understand what the situation is around this entrance, because there is actually, there's an entrance to the building next to it with steps that protrude out, and this, so if you look on the image, you can just see poking in the steps protruding out and the setback at the station entrance. So this isn't a flat facade where you've got a 1 metre projection just sticking out into the pavement. And I just wanted to clarify that, councillors, because it's been raised a couple of times, just for you to have the full information in terms of where the structure would be located in relation to where pedestrians may or may not be moving up and down Exhibition Road.
Can you then, do we have a slide with a picture of the entrance on it that would give us the before and after, if you that's the only one we've got, isn't it?
Is this helpful? This is a CGI image
Yeah,
showing the before and after, but it doesn't highlight particularly well that point that Michael's just made in regard to the part of the building that does set out from the entrance.
Okay, any more questions to the officers? Councillor Benton?
Thank you. So, I'll try and get through them quickly. Number one, with regards to submission of details condition, as mentioned, it's is it possible to tighten that up in such a way that actually, you know, involves specific bodies to be? I mean, you know, should we grant the application that we actually can specifically have? You know, I don't know how it would work. Like, there is actually consultation with, you know, concerned, you know, residents, etc. Because I'm not quite sure when it says here what form, content, size, location, setting out of explanatory text. I don't know who would approve that. I don't know how that would work. And I would just hope that it would involve, you know, the local people who are concerned, so that everyone's sort of happy, as possible. If you know what I mean. Does that make sense?
I think so. So is your concern that the conditions may not be consulted upon widely enough?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So the conditions applications would be an application in its own right, and they would go on a weekly list. We wouldn't necessarily consult on them because that's not part of the remit of a conditions application. But I could suggest potentially that we could put an informative on saying that the applicant is advised to engage prior to the submission of the conditions application.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is the applicants are very amenable, you know, either way. I just, you know, who approves it is really what I'm asking, I suppose. But I think that's enough for now. Yeah, cool.
Could it come back to committee? Yeah, so we could ask for the conditions application to come back to committee for the committee to make a decision on it, if that was useful.
Okay. Thanks, and I'll race through the rest of it. And this is actually...
Are you suggesting that you want that informative to be put on?
Yes, please. If how best to do that, you know.
Sorry, it was to put an informative on to require the applicant to engage prior to the submission of the discharge of conditions application in relation to the details?
I mean, that makes sense to me, unless I'm missing something, yeah.
I can't see that there would be a problem with that.
Thank you. And again, I'll race through these others. So, and also just in terms of talking about the how many families are affected, and I just wanted, if I could just get some clarity, because as I understand it, yes, there are only X number directly of families who, however, my sense is that they're very much embedded in a larger community, hence it actually affects more people than are directly part of this group, and that's what's informed the assessment of how many people it's going to benefit. Am I right in thinking of it that way?
We've assessed the application based on the evidence that's been provided to us in respect of the community that this would serve and the ability for a certain sector of the community to use the station, and that's what we've based our judgment on. I wouldn't say we've based it on a specific number, we've based it on a
sure.
section.
Well, I mean, there is a specific number.
There is, yes.
There is in the report. So am I right in thinking that number is essentially extrapolated from how many people it affects, you know, not so much the exact number of people who are members of the group itself, but rather that it's part of a wider community, and as applicant said, no? Okay. Sorry, I think we're
with the officers now, and what I think the message, the answer is that the officers work from the information they're given. They were given a figure of 15,000, and that's the figure, 1,500, sorry, 1,500, and that's the figure they're working on.
Okay, well, okay, fine. I'm not going to dwell on that then. And the last one is just for off the back of the last question. I don't get the impression that, as has been brought up, that I don't see how it's really a big material obstruction given what's actually around the entrance as it is. So, I mean, am I right in thinking that it's not because there's talk of this giant obstruction in the middle of the sort of thoroughfare, and I know how busy it gets there, but am I right in thinking that actually that's it is going to be mitigated quite a bit by the fact that there's a lot of surrounding structure around it?
Yeah, as you could see from the photograph that was pointed out, there is structure already there, and the highways officers have reviewed that information and considered that that wouldn't be an unreasonable obstruction of the highway. So on that basis, that's how officers have recommended that this is acceptable.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Lamas, you wanted to say something?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It was in relation to the previous question. I just wanted to clarify that as Jessica said, it was based on the information provided, and the report does refer to 1,500 families, so there isn't a specific number of individuals identified, but that's the basis on which officers have assessed it.
Thank you. It really was just clarity I was looking for there, and you've provided it.
Okay, I'm going to take one more question, and then we need to move to a vote. Any more questions? Okay, so we have two votes obviously on here. We have the planning, and then we have the listed building. So we're now on the planning. It is recommended that the committee grants planning permission with conditions listed in section 8 of this report, plus the additional informative. Would those in favour please raise their hands? Would those against please raise their hands? That is refused. We then go to the second on the listed buildings application, and there is an addendum here, and the wording has changed simply because there was a typing mistake on this. It is that it is recommended the committee grant listed building consent with the conditions listed in section 2 of this report. Those in favour, please raise their hand. Husband, you're raising your hand? Yeah. Yeah, okay, good. Those against, please raise their hands. That, again, is refused.
So we voted against the recommendation, but we need to debate reasons, and someone needs to vote and second them, and then you need to vote on it.
So we now need, obviously, to clarify the specific reason that we are refusing the application. So if we go to the planning permission, who would like to, Councillor Lloyd North or Councillor Mackover, could you propose particularly why you're refusing it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the application was made in good faith, and what I was having to do in my decision is weigh up the harm versus the public benefit, and the harms that I noted was the structure does not preserve or enhance both, and this works for both the listed building and for the conservation area. There isn't anything else like it. I don't have the information in front of me as to the degree it will cause an obstruction other than the size of it. I don't know how big those steps are in the image that we were shown. It seemed to be a particular angle of view that made it hard for me to judge how much it would stick out compared with the steps. I also have you can use it where you want to, but just my own reasoning was that the method of fixing, even though it said it was suggested to be confirmed by condition, I don't think that it would be possible to confirm by condition, because we keep hearing that there won't be, that it will just attach into the mortar. But my own inspection of the way that the building is constructed is the mortar is too slim to support this metal structure. So there's an obstruction, there's a harm to the building. I'm not also a fan of this.
Councillor Mackelber, we've got to get this into a...
Okay, well, I'm giving you the things, and you can take them. And then on I don't think that the harm to the building was not outweighed by the public benefit, would be the other thing that I would be saying, because looking at the figures in this, this is I think it looks like about 2% based on the figures that I've seen of the Jewish faith. And of that, it's a minority of that. I think we've given 1,500 out of 6,000. And so when it comes to, I would think of public benefit as something like, a large number of the public can benefit from, such as disabled access into a tube, for example. But this is a sort of very small number of people. So when we have to balance the degree of public benefit with the degree of harm, that's why I don't see it coming out.
And just see if Jessica or Martin, have we got a specific reason for refusing it we can put as an emotion?
I think from that I've drawn that there's a lack of information that members have to make a decision based on the fixing of the structure to the listed building as one. And then there's another part of that, which is that the harm that has been identified is not outweighed by the public benefits. So maybe some clarification as to whether this is, even if those fixing details were clarified, if the harm would still not be outweighed, or whether there's a lack of information.
That's proposed by Councillor Mackelber, seconded by Councillor North. Okay.
Sorry, were you looking for clarification? Yeah.
Sorry, I think we just need a little bit of clarification as to whether it's a refusal based on lack of information in regard to the fixings, so therefore we can't decide whether there's sufficient harm to be outweighed, or whether there is just, even if the fixings were acceptable, whether there wasn't enough public benefit to outweigh the harm.
Well, it was also the visual impact failing to preserve or enhance, and that was a point made in many of the objection letters, but also by the objector's speech.
Okay, so I'm going to pause it there. I think it's the visual impact. We've got that one.
Okay, so
that's your proposing, Councillor North. Are you seconding that? Okay. Can we then? Do we need another one?
You need to then vote on that.
Okay. Those in favour of that, raise their hands. Those against it. Any abstentions?
you'd need to make another reason for refusal for the listed building consent, but it could be similar.
Yeah. So we now move to the listed building consent application, which has been refused. What is the reason we wish to put that down for the refusal?
I mean, on the same theme, I would say it would be to permanent harm to the listed building, both in appearance and in the physical structure. Because if it was to be removed in the future, then there would be the impact of the fixings.
Okay, Jessica, do you want to repeat that back, and then you've got it.
Yeah, so in relation to the listed building, it would be the impact on the significance of the heritage asset and the issue of if it was to be removed in the future, there would be irreplaceable harm, if that's the right word, to the listed building.
Okay.
Yep.
Seconded. Councillor North. Those in favour, please raise their hands. Those against, please raise their hand. Thank you very much. Thank you. We now move on to the next application, which is a former New Church Centre building. Who is going to do that one?
That's myself. Thank you, Chairman. The application before members this evening relates to the former New Church, which is located at number 5 Pembridge Villas. The aerial imaging on the slide before you just identifies the application building by the red arrow here. The application seeks planning permission for an extension to the front part of the church to provide a further library space to be used as ancillary to the existing church use. The existing front elevation can be seen on this slide. There is also areas marked in the red for the fabric to be demolished, and then in the green is the fabric to be removed, preserved and reinstated. On the existing front elevation, members may note the neighbouring properties. So you've got number 17 Viscount Court located to the left-hand side of the building, and then to the right-hand is number 7A Pembridge Villas, or number 7. The proposed front elevation can be seen on this slide. It may be hard to make out, but it may be better to see in members' packs, but there is a kind of faint red line as to where the existing building is, and then the proposed extension here. And members may note kind of this fabric was to be retained and reused as part of the new scheme. This is the existing side elevation, so the extension would be located to this front part. In the background is the neighbouring commercial and residential block within Viscount Court. Again, on this plan, the green shading is the areas to be removed, preserved and reinstated, and then the areas of red is to be demolished. This is the proposed side elevation, so members can note the extension in this area. There are also windows located on the side. We are recommending a condition, which is condition 8, for these windows to be obscurely glazed and fixed shut. This plan just shows the existing first floor plan, so the existing library located to the frontage. So that is for the display of religious material ancillary to the existing church use of the site. And then these images just show the proposed second and tower floor plan, which again would be ancillary library space to the existing church use. These are some proposed illustrations just taken from the submission of the application. So this shows the proposed additional height in relation to the neighbouring properties. And lastly, this image just shows, again, the relationship with those neighbouring properties and the windows located and the location on the neighbouring properties. So you've got Viscount Court located here with the windows set back. And then on the other side, you've got number 7 Pembridge Villas with the nearby openings located on that mansard. On this left-hand image, if members can see the yellow line, which is just here, that marks a location of the extension to the frontage there. That concludes my presentation this evening. Officer's recommendation is to grant planning permission, subject to the conditions set out within the officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we do have some speakers on this, so I'd like to call the objectors. We've got Councillor Gardner, Mr. Gutierrez, and Rebecca Watson. Who's Councillor Gardner? You have 2 minutes in your own right there. Are you going to start? Thank you.
I speak as ward councillor. My main objection is the windows in either side of the extension. One of these side walls abuts Viscount Court, where many residents have windows, and the addition of this new window at such a height is an unwelcome intrusion. Even if opaque, they will still see figures and light. And we could ask why it is even necessary, given the plans show it is by a staircase. On the other side of the building is 7A Pembridge Villas, a residential house, and the officer's report already acknowledges that this extension will cause a sense of enclosure for them, so let's not make it worse by adding a high window as well. As you see from the slides earlier, the symmetry of the building is easily maintained without the side windows. In fact, it is better off without them, as there are no windows at roof height, which is the same level as the proposed side windows. Day and sunlight will come from the three new windows at the front, and the 2 side windows should be withdrawn from the application entirely or refused. My second concern is the substance of the applicant, the Georgius Charitable Trust. The Charity Commission lists 4 directors appointed in 2018. It shows it is 750 days overdue in its charity reporting. Financially, it shows no income or expenditure ever. My ask is that the Council look for an upfront bond to guarantee the works will be carried out to a high standard and ensure the dome and tower are protected when they're taken off-site and in restoring them to the building. The church is a designated heritage asset and an important part of the conservation area. There is nothing in the conditions to protect the dome or the tower, nor does the applicant appear to have the finances to undertake such an important project, hence the need for a bond. And lastly, I would ask that a condition be added that this new internal space is only used as a library, and that the heavily used bus stop is included in the construction traffic management plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Now call upon whoever. Are you going to share it, or is it you just yourself? Okay, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Is it working? Thank you, councillors. I'm a committee member of the Viscount Court Residents Association, which is the block of 42 flats directly to the east of New Church, and I am specifically the owner of the first floor flat closest to the tower in the front of the church. We collectively object to the proposed extension since it will mean an impact of reduced sun and daylight to lower first and second floor flats. Several of the affected rooms, as noted in the sun and daylight report, are not bedrooms but are in fact home offices, such as in my case, which will now be lack light and feel more enclosed. We also object due to loss of privacy in these west-facing flats by the east, the intrusion of privacy into these flats by the east-facing window of the new floor of the church, which is destined for use as a visitor center. The Planning Committee's report is incorrect in saying that there is no overlooking. There is clearly overlooking at an angle and into rooms used regularly 12 hours a day. This will also be an issue during the works where there will be scaffolding and workers. We object on grounds of impact on the quiet enjoyment of our homes. We've put up with daily noise and external refurb of the church for over a year, in the back, in the front, and on the sides. And we are surprised that there is now a new submission. We object on the grounds of noise pollution. New windows facing Viscount Court will bring noise pollution during the day if it's openable, exacerbated by the echoing canyon effect of the alley, which we've suffered during several parties thrown in the church over the last 2 years. We object due to light pollution. Any additional windows facing Viscount Court flats will cause light pollution late in the day. We also object due to the added construction traffic chaos and congestion that there is already on this very busy 5-street junction with the ward's largest construction project opposite at 2 Pembridge Villas and a bus stop serving 4 bus routes literally in front of the church and across the street. It's crucial to note that number 5 Pembridge Villas is not being used as a church. The main building is unused, other than for several birthday parties that were thrown, and the back is a rehab center, which had been planned to be a nursery. Therefore, we are skeptical of the Planning Committee's perceived community benefits in this extension. As a condition for approval, we request no windows on the east side of the new floor facing Viscount Court, which will have sufficient light from the north and west, to restrict any further redevelopment by entering into a Section 106 agreement to prevent this site from being continuously enlarged over the next 10 years. We request medium density mesh to cover any scaffolding to reduce overlooking and maintain privacy for the residents during works. We request restricted working days and hours to allow peace and privacy for neighbors, i.e. Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30 only. And we request all residents of all nearby buildings be consulted before a CTMP is brought to committee for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I have an opportunity for councillors to question the speakers. Who would like to? Sorry? Yes? The applicant, sorry, the applicant speaks, sorry, I beg your pardon, yes, sorry, the applicant, I do beg your pardon, I was denying you the opportunity. You can now speak for 3 minutes, sir, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. I'll spend some time speaking in response to the concerns and objections that you've heard about this evening. Firstly, though, I would like to highlight that the proposals are considered to represent a sympathetic addition to this front part of the church. The extensions and replica tower will stitch together seamlessly with the host building and will appear balanced and harmonious. The change in scale is appropriate given the surrounding buildings, and ultimately the conservation area is preserved. The extension is to provide a library and reading room connected to the church. It will be for congregational use only, for reading and studying philosophy and theology in Greek and English. The library's capacity is 14 people maximum. The church is currently closed, but it has become a functioning Greek Orthodox church with a Sunday service, evening vespers, and use on feast days. There is a rehabilitation and wellness centre clinic in the former nursery at the rear of the site, but this is totally separate to the church and will continue as such. The potential impacts on neighbours have been carefully considered. A sunlight and daylight assessment was included with the application. This has tested the impacts on Viscount Court, and it shows that all windows pass the required guidelines in respect to both sunlight and daylight, and there will be no noticeable reductions. The window in the side wall of the extension facing Viscount Court is over a staircase. It is to be stained glass and so is semi-transparent. The windows on Viscount Court are set further back by some degree, and so we do not think that there will be opportunities for overlooking. The window on the side wall facing number 7, Pembridge Villas, looks out to a blank wall and is below the height of the dormer windows in that roof. And as you've heard, a condition is to be imposed to make these windows non-openable and obscurely glazed. The extension is only on the flat roof of the front part of the church. This is forward of the windows in the side of Viscount Court by around 3 metres. It may well be seen in oblique views from these windows, but we do not think it is something that will cause an overwhelming sense of enclosure. These windows will still have unaffected views directly across the church and to the rear. The design and size of the side windows are considered to be architecturally appropriate in order to preserve the heritage value of the building. They are stained glass and recessed and will serve a library and reading room where lighting is likely to be more subdued. They are located in an area where there are other windows at this level, and we do not think that they will cause light spill or light pollution. A CTMP was not requested or required with the application, as it does not involve basement development or substantial demolition, and it's not a major scheme. We do recognise concerns about construction impacts have been raised during the application. So there is an agreed pre-commencement condition requiring a detailed CTMP to be submitted for approval before any works can start. This will be prepared in consultation with local residents and also with TfL due to the bus stop located outside the site. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I would now like to give opportunity for the members to question the speakers. Who's going to start? Councillor Idris.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to the applicant. How much consultation with your neighbours have you had before embarking on this project?
So there was consultation before submission. It took the form of a letter drop to local residents to inform them of the proposals and to invite comment on what was going to be submitted. So it wasn't an exhibition, but local residents were consulted before the application was submitted. That took place in August, towards the end of August. That took place for about a 2-week period.
A library will actually require people sitting there and reading, and maybe in the evening they will turn the lights on when it gets dark. One of the windows is causing your neighbors a little bit of anxiety, will you consider foregoing that window?
Well, I have the architects here as well, so they may answer that question. I think we don't consider the window creates an amenity problem. It will be opaque, it will be fixed shut, and I think the angles between this proposed window and the windows in Viscount Court are quite sharp, so we don't think there really will be any overlooking issue. And if they're fixed shut, then any noise that might emanate from that room would be contained. And the obscure glazing and the nature of the room, really, we think will limit any light spill from that window. So we felt it's appropriate. It fits in with the design of the church, and we're following the same style of window up to the new floor. Have you got anything?
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else would like to ask a question?
Thank you. I'm very familiar with this building. It is a stunning piece of architecture and part of the history of the area, and attracts a lot of sensitivities you can imagine. This is a question to the applicant, sorry. Are you open to a bond to secure if the work is done properly? Because I would hate to be on a planning committee that approved this, and then you go past 2 years later and you see a substandard result because the dome wasn't protected properly or the bricks weren't protected properly when they were taken away. So would you be open to that suggestion from the objectors?
I believe that it is a possibility, but I don't think there is any requirement for such. If you know the building well, you know, and as has been mentioned before, over the last year there's been substantial care and refurbishment of the front facade of the building, and as you can see on the front cover of the design access statement, what a stunning building it is, and it looks. The same team are on board to carry out the works to the extension, and it's certainly planned to be done with great care. So I'm not sure a bond is necessary, but obviously if that is a requirement, then we can certainly consider that.
Or maybe I can clarify that by saying, if there was, if I asked the question to the officers of what guarantee or clarification that can be given to protect that and to allay the fears, because it is a genuine fear that that something as sensitive as this is quite a major piece of undertaking, and we've all seen examples in the area where these things have gone wrong. Okay, I'll ask that question to the officers.
Could I just ask a question about use? We've obviously had two slightly different stories here about the use of the building. I'd like to ask the applicant, can you confirm what the building is used for today and how often it's used and for what purpose, and just clarify that,
Sorry,
please.
Chairman.
Today, not what it was used for in the past.
Absolutely. The site is effectively split into two. The church to the front is currently closed and has undergone a refurbishment over the last year. As you can see in the planning statement as well, you can see the existing new photographs of the library as it now stands. I think anybody who looks at those photos can understand and see the quality of work that's been carried out, and that should alleviate any issues for construction. You know, the quality of workmanship that's going into this, and the cost is vast. The building to the rear that attaches to the rear of the church is an ancillary building that historically has had nursery use. It is currently being used as a rehabilitation and wellness clinic, and that is a standalone use building that is continued to carry on like that. It's tenanted and separate to the actual church itself.
So you're saying it is not currently used as a church, as a practicing church? You mentioned in the speech that there are services there, but currently?
Currently not.
And how long has there not been services?
Prior to 2018, when our client purchased the property, it was being used as a church. It was used as a Swedish Protestant church, I believe it was. Our client took on the building to carry out the works that he has proposed, which is to be used as a Greek Orthodox church.
Can look when we speak to the officers, how can we make sure that it is going to be used as a church? And because in your speech you said it is a church, a working church with various services in. I'm now hearing that it hasn't been since 2018. So we need to make sure that whatever happens to this building, it continues to be, or it will be used as a church.
That is the reason our client purchased the church, is to use it as exactly that. Obviously, if there's any sort of requirements or stipulations on that, that's absolutely fine, because that is what we plan for the church to be used as, is a functioning church for a Greek Orthodox congregation.
Thank you. Any more questions for the speakers? No? Okay. So we now move to questions for the officers. Who would like to ask a question? Councillor Idris.
I'm probably going to nick your question, because I want to find out whether the officers know what this building was going to be used as before granting permission.
Thank you, Councillor. So the details put forward as part of this application suggest that there wouldn't be any change of use. So the application isn't seeking a change of use from one use to another. The most recent lawful use of this part of the building is as a church, which is class F1, and the details provided as part of this application suggest that that would remain, and therefore an assessment into the change of use hasn't been carried out, as there isn't one. I would just suggest that if there, in the future, if there was a change of use, then that would require planning permission in its own right, and that would be considered as part of a separate application against its own planning merits.
Is there anything we can do to mitigate that just going forward? Make sure that it is, so not allow anyone to come up with an application later on in the years asking for change of use? Is there something we can do right now?
So in terms of a condition, as I've mentioned, if in the future the building was to be used as a different use, they would need to apply for that separately, and it would require a planning application, and it would be considered. There aren't any, I believe, remits within the permitted development rights for a change of use from class F1 to an alternative use. If members wanted to restrict the use, they could potentially look at a condition, but I would just pose the question as to whether it meets the tests and whether it's reasonable, as any change would require planning permission in its own right.
Councillor North.
Thank you. I've got two questions, one with regard to the windows, and the other one is with regard to some form of protection that we can offer as a condition. With regard to the windows, is it something that we're so wedded to? There's obviously concerns. Is there a way of mitigating those concerns further?
So in relation to the windows on the side elevations, and I think has been picked up by the residents this evening, as particularly on the eastern elevation, they have been assessed as part of the officer's report, and due to the location of them and the kind of the views from them, there wouldn't be any direct overlooking. A condition is recommended as condition 8 for those windows, both the side windows on the east and the west elevation, to be obscurely glazed and fixed shut. So that would also minimise any views from them as well. So officers are satisfied that there wouldn't be any impact in terms of living conditions by way of the introduction of those windows.
And my second question about is there some security that we can attach to this, some guarantee in the form of a bond? Because we've all seen subcontractors work and original features can be lost. I would hate to go past it in 10 years' time and think, oh my God, they just didn't do it right.
Thank you. So as the kind of the plan shown to members this evening and within your pack, they do detail part of the building to be reused and retained. Those plans and those drawing numbers do form part of condition 2, which requires the development to be built out in accordance with those plans. If for any reason the development wasn't built out in accordance with those, then it may be that the council could look to take enforcement action. Should members want to kind of strengthen that condition, either an informative or a condition could be worded to ensure that those materials are safely stored off-site and then ready for reuse at the appropriate time.
I would be keen for that, thank you.
Sorry, just to confirm, would that be as an informative or as an additional condition? Sorry.
I would prefer a condition.
Okay. And sorry, just to clarify, would members like those details to be submitted in terms of the storage of those for approval or a compliance condition? In other words, would members or officers like to view kind of the method in which they would be stored safely and approved in writing, or are members happy with a condition just to simply state that they should be stored off-site, potentially safely, ready to be reused?
The first. Well, I would be confident and trusting in our officers to oversee that rather than it come back to committee.
Great, thank you.
Do you need that form of proposing? You do.
Yes.
So, Councillor North, have you got the right wording? You're happy with the wording?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
And just on the use, I don't know whether this is working. Just on the use class, I see in 3.1 it says the church has been, or the building has formerly been used as a church and retail space. It says use class E and F1. From the discussion that we've had, what we've heard from the applicant is that it has been used as a church and will again be used as a church. I would feel more comfort, given there seems to be some sort of discussion about it having been a retail space, if we could confirm that the new space we understand is going to be that this front building part is all going to be F1.
Yes, I believe that's correct. I think where it references Class E is also in relation to the rear of the site, where it's formerly been used as a nursery. But the frontage, and as the details provided as part of the planning statement and the application made, is for it to be used ancillary to the church, which is F1.
Okay, can we just clarify the two things then? So let's go back to Councillor North's proposal about the storage and the reuse of the material. Councillor North, can you propose that, please? Somebody second it? You have a choice there if you want to go for. One person raise your hand. Councillor Idris. All in favour? Thank you. So now we then come to the second point, which is Councillor Mackover's point. Is there anything so what are you wanting to go in?
Well, just a way that we can clarify that the building that we're talking about, the front part and the new build section, is F1 and not for any other use.
Thank you. So I believe as submitted and the details provided is for it to be used as F1, as suggested by the applicants this evening as well.
So you're saying there's no need to add anything to that? You don't think?
I don't believe so. If there was to be a change of use, they would need to apply for that separately.
Ms. Lemas?
Alice is absolutely correct. The applicant has stated the building will be used within F1 and therefore a further application would be required. I would suggest, although officers don't think it necessary and our advice to members is that it's not, you may consider a condition necessary to secure the use on the basis of the intensification that would arise from the extension, that you want confidence that it is secured as a place of worship within use class F1. And you will have seen in previous committees a condition like that on numerous applications. Obviously, as Alice has suggested, officers don't think it's necessary in this case because of the nature of the application not involving a change of use and any change of use requiring permission. But if you are in disagreement, you could add that condition.
So we're talking really about belts and braces in a way, aren't we? So what would the members like to do? You'd like to add that additional condition. Have you got the suitable wording for that, Alice, or do you need it?
No, that's fine. I can word a suitable condition.
Do you want to sort of read out and then we can decide who's going to propose it?
Would it be for the development hereby permitted to only be used within the use class F1 and for any change would require planning permission? Or
Sorry, Alice. Can I suggest that and is our more typical wording when it's the specific use that we are concerned with is rather than broadly relating to use class F1, which includes various other uses like education, libraries, etc., is that you restrict it to a place of worship and no other use within F1, as well as, clearly binding it into that use.
Is that the committee happy with that?
Yeah, it's a library. We've heard it's a library, so it's not, it's related to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Ancillary, yeah.
So do you wish to propose that or not? Yes. Okay, so proposed by Councillor Idris, seconded by Councillor North. Thank you. Can we just then touch on the use of the library? Obviously, we heard quite a lot of concern about the library, guaranteeing the library is used as a library. Do we need to add anything to strengthen what we have in the conditions or in the application?
so, as detailed as part of this application, as we've discussed this evening, the library is to be ancillary to the church. So, class F1F, which is place of worship or religious institution, is also states or in connection with such use. So this library would be in connection with the church use on site.
I'm just thinking around it couldn't be used for anything else, you're saying, that isn't to do with the connection of the church and as a library.
No, not with the condition that members have discussed. If it was used for something else, then it would require planning permission.
Okay. Happy to leave that one as it is. Okay. We very much regard this as a very special building and we wish it to be developed sympathetically, and we've added conditions on it to strengthen that, hopefully. So I would ask now to go to a vote. It's recommended the committee grant planning permission with the conditions listed in section of this report, plus the additional conditions that we have put on today. Would those in favour please raise their hands? Will those against? Any abstentions? That is granted. Thank you very much. We now move to 90 to 92 Cromwell Road. Who's going to present that, please?
Thank you, Chairman. That's me. This is an application for members for the mansard roof extension to provide a three-bedroom self-contained fifth-floor apartment with terrace areas. This application is the resubmission of a previously approved application, which is a material consideration for the purposes of determining this application before you today. This application has had 5 letters of objections which raise concerns regarding impact to living conditions, use of flats as short-term lets, impacts from construction, overdevelopment and drainage. So the application site is at 90 to 92 Cromwell Road and is a 5-storey plus lower ground end of terrace building which is located on the corner of Gloucester Road and Cromwell Road. The site is within the Cromwell Conservation Area. This is an aerial photograph. You can see the end property at the corner of Cromwell Road. This is an existing elevation of the property. This one's taken from the Cromwell Road elevation. And this one is taken from the Gloucester Road elevation. Oh, sorry. Gloucester Road elevation existing, Gloucester Road elevation proposed, where you can see the mansard roof extension. This is the existing elevation from Cromwell Road this time. And this is the proposed elevation from Cromwell Road, and you can see the mansard roof extensions. It's useful to note on this plan that there is a small slice taken out, as you were, of the mansard roof extension to the left of the plan. This is to ensure that a roof light serving the existing properties below still maintains access to daylight. This is a plan showing the proposed 5th floor layout, and it's useful to note here the light well that is providing light down to that existing skylight into the 4th floor property, and then these 3 skylights which are also afforded a gap to ensure that daylight is still reaching that 4th floor property below. Again, this is useful to show those skylights again. That's the last one. So I think moving on to the assessment, the proposal would create an additional residential unit, and so it would meet the requirements of CH1 of the local plan. The proposed unit would meet the minimum space standards for a 3-bedroom, 5-person unit and the technical space standards, and that would be acceptable. The application site is within a conservation area, and it's considered that the proposed introduction of the mansard roof extension would be in keeping with the character of the area and this end of terrace property. The development is considered to not have a significant impact on the living conditions of the existing properties, and that the daylight sunlight to the 4th floor property would be acceptable, and the access to daylight from those skylights retained as part of the proposed development. So the proposal is considered to be acceptable in terms of construction, and sufficient conditions are considered to be appended to the application that would require construction management to be considered. I think that concludes my presentation, and the recommendation is to approve this application subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement to restrict permit parking. Thanks. Happy.
Thank you very much. There are speakers on this application, so I would invite Mr. Lester of the objectors to speak, and you have up to 3 minutes, please.
Good evening, Chairman. The Council has taken great care in recent years to conserve the Victorian heritage of Cromwell Road. There are no mansards on any of the corner sites containing similar buildings along this part of Cromwell Road. These corner buildings form a majestic entrance to the northern section of Gloucester Road. Other blocks near to them do not have mansards. One is Grade 2 listed. Allowing this application would create a bad precedent for other similar corner sites and neighbouring buildings, which would then be despoiled by mansards, made worse by the fact that they may use different designs and materials, resulting in a messy roofline over time. Whilst there are mansards going westwards next to 90 to 92, they are mid-terrace and form a continuous line of similar design and appearance. Those mansards spoil the open effect of natural light passing back and forth between the bottle pillars of the parapet balustrade, thereby rendering their most decorative effects redundant. We consider too much weight is being given to the housing delivery test. The Council has made and is making considerable progress in meeting its targets. This application will deliver one high-end apartment for use by one household. This hardly makes a dent in the target. In terms of the harms being done to achieve this, is it really worth it? The material consideration refers to an application approved nearly 10 years ago. Some of the supporting documents reveal differences. The policy documents relied on then are over 12 years old and have been superseded, with greater emphasis being placed on conservation. The material consideration, though a factor, should not be a determining one. Turning to the number of flats in the building, the residents feel that it is saturated and the building cannot take any more apartments or an increase in height and density. The fact that 6.3 of the report advises no parking permit is an indication that the space is overpopulated. The reference to the light well, the actual light well will be enclosed between the higher mansard roof, thereby reducing the amount of light going into the building compared to what it is now. The application repeatedly butts up against the letter and spirit of the Local Plan 2019 and the conservation appraisals. For all these reasons, we would ask you to consider these points very carefully before reaching your decision to refuse planning permission for this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to call upon Mr. Stamos or Mr. Kadem, who's going to speak. You've got 3 minutes.
I'm George Stamos, Stamos Yao Architects.
Can you really speak up? The
yes,
microphone
yep,
seems to be
Stamos
quite
Yao Architects and planning agent. The site consists of the last 2 buildings within a consistent Victorian terrace, which is generally 7 stories high, comprising mansard roof extensions, except along the application site itself. As previously mentioned, the application is a resubmission of a previously approved 2014 application, since lapsed and not implemented, and as such has benefited over the years from the planning department's continuous feedback in order to maintain the extension as subservient to the host building, sympathetically designed and well balanced when considered in context with the terrace as a whole. The character and roofscape of the terrace group has therefore already been altered and compromised by a variety of roof extensions, with these being several examples of mansard roof extensions in the vicinity of the site, with associated dormer windows. The introduction of a mansard roof on this corner building would not be incongruous or out of character, and the proposed dormer windows would be discreetly sited and set back from the parapet. The overall bulk and massing is minimized and so would not overbear the existing building and would sit comfortably in this location. The lift overrun itself has been minimized and would be no higher than the main section of the roof. The proposed terrace would be discreetly sited at the rear, and given the height of the existing building, would not be visible from public views. The roof extension has been designed to include a cutout section as previously described, and so would retain existing roof lights which serve hallways and non-habitable rooms. On this basis, the proposal would continue to provide daylight to these existing roof lights, and as such, the proposal would not materially harm the amenity of neighbouring occupiers in this regard. The proposed roof extension would be set back from the parapet and would sit comfortably on the existing building. The design would be sympathetic to the character of the conservation area and considered in keeping. As such, the proposed development would continue to preserve the character and appearance of the building and the wider Cornwall conservation area. The building will itself undergo, as part of the work, significant upgrading of the existing fabric and enhancement in order to bring the building to current fire regulation standards. This includes a firefighting lift, upgraded 1-hour partitions, and compartmentation horizontally and vertically throughout the building. And just to answer, just to mention also, the building, the site is a corner plot, and as such lends itself gravitas. Corner plots tend to be more substantial bookends to terraces, and I do not think that a mansard extension in this location would harm the conservation area and would be in keeping with the locality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to give members of the committee a chance to ask questions of the speakers. Who would like to? Councillor Mackover.
Yeah. Again, I don't know if you can hear me okay. It seems quite quiet tonight. Couple of details on this, just looking at the pack. You mentioned this is a resubmission of the 2014 consent. Is there any changes to it, any sort of external changes I would notice? Is it exactly the same application?
From memory, it's exactly the same application.
Okay, thank you. Second one is, I see one of the conditions, and that would be, normally I talk to officers, but since you're a well-informed applicant, one of the conditions is materials to match existing. What material are you proposing for the windows? Because there are a variety of different materials if I look at that building from the street.
So they would be timber-framed sash windows to match existing.
Thank you. That's helpful. Maybe we'll note it somewhere, because I think there's some different materials at different floors on that building. And the third is, if I was minded to move ahead with this, I have a concern about how, because it's not an insignificant bit of building, it is an impossible corner to park on or service, and there will obviously be lots of materials going up and down, and scaffold, etc. I don't know whether my colleagues would be supportive or not, but it seems to me this one is a difficult enough build to. I didn't see it actually in the conditions, but maybe it is for a CTMP. That would be. I would require a CTMP to see that it could be safely constructed. I may have missed it. Is it in there? I'll ask the applicant. Did you submit a CTMP?
I don't believe it was submitted, but I think it's a reasonable request for a condition to consider this as part of the construction.
Thank you. Councillor Idris.
I was hoping you will finish all my questions, but what I was curious about is how are you building are you doing the development via taking material internally and going up, or are you going to use to build it from a scaffolding all the way?
So the construction will most likely be undertaken internally insofar as possible, using the existing staircases for lightweight materials. And for the heavier construction, these will have to be scaffolded and mounted, lifted into place via the external walkways and scaffolding.
How long do you expect the construction to take?
Probably 6 to 7 months.
So there would be a scaffolding for 6 to 7 months?
No, that would be implemented during the phasing of the work. So scaffolding may take place for maybe 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay.
Just to heavy lift the heavier items up.
Thank you.
Could I just ask a question of the applicant, please? Mr. Lester mentioned the notion that this is a corner site and it will be the only one with a mansard on if this was granted. Could you just comment on that and how you would see that in terms of the impact on not just that building, but the area where it will be the only one with a mansard at the corner? Yeah.
I believe the terrace, the end of the terrace, the opposite bookend, is already mansarded, if that's a phrase, and therefore will serve to equalise the bookend at the end of each terrace. And it's not unheard of to have a mansard at all as a framing of a period terrace. That's quite normal within central London.
Okay, thank you. To officers. Councillor Idris.
Thank you. I'm surprised we didn't see any image of how this height, the height of this building after the addition, in comparison with the rest of the area. Because I'm curious to see, will this make the building much higher than the others, or is there no change, or is not material?
I can add to that.
For the officers, thank you.
So in the presentation there is proposed elevations which show this in context to the neighbouring property, the mansard roof to the terrace. But I don't have a longer street scene elevation, unfortunately, in this presentation pack to show you it in a wider context. So that, as you can see, it's not uncommon of a feature, and it doesn't go significantly taller. If anything, it's slightly lower in respect of the neighbouring property.
Councillor North?
Yes, my concern is similar to Councillor McAvoy with the CTMP. What can we do to secure that? Because I've got the same concerns.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. My apologies, I made a mistake, and it's actually the Code of Construction Practice that's appended as a condition. So if you were minded to grant permission, you could propose that a CMT, can never get the words in the right order, CMPT condition is appended to require that to be submitted prior to construction.
I said, is that something we want?
So I just on that point, I think we definitely want to see CTMP, and I think we heard the applicant say that was a reasonable thing to ask, so I definitely want to condition that for officers to check that will be. It's full of schools next door. There's a new sort of primary school as well, so nursery school. So it's definitely one that would be important to look at details. To match existing details, I think I just wanted noted somewhere that the applicant confirms that the windows will be timber, even though there are different materials on that particular building. I think just wanted to check with applicants, with the officers as well, that it's your understanding that the application is the same as that granted 2014, because that's obviously material, and there haven't been any major design changes that would render that application not the same level of consideration now.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I would just draw your attention, there's already condition 9 proposed, which is for external windows and doors permitted to be timber framed and painted, and the windows to be double hung, white painted, slided sashes, and so maintained. So I think that might cover off that point with regard to the windows. And then your second point.
Can we just then deal with the CTMP and get that condition in, please? Have you got the wording? I mean, it's a very simple wording, I think, isn't it?
We have a standard condition for CTMP, so we can just impose that if members are minded.
Could I have someone propose that? Councillor North, someone to second it, please?
Yeah, I'll second.
All those in favour?
And then should I come in on the second point in regard to the already extant permission, which is now lapsed in this application before members, sorry. I can't. And it's officers' opinion that although the architectural drawings have been undertaken by a different architect, the scheme is as it was proposed in the 2014 application, and there's not been any material changes in our opinion.
So I think we're ready now to come to a vote on that. Para 1.3 is recommended the committee authorise the Director of Planning and Place to grant planning permission, satisfactory completion of an undertaking, or to refuse planning permission of an undertaking or agreement to secure the government has not been satisfactorily completed. So those in favour, please raise their hands. Subject to the additional conditions that we've got, yeah. Those in favour, please raise their hands. Anybody against? Any abstentions? Thank you. That is granted. So we now move to 63 Addison Road.
Good evening, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
I can indeed.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. May I draw your attention, first of all, to the addendum report for the North Team area. This is simply just to provide further clarification of the proposed side extensions to the application. The side extensions are located on the right-hand side when you look at the front elevation of the proposed development and are hereby referred to as the historic extension. So the side extensions to the historic extension. So here is the application site itself, which is obviously on Addison Road, which is located to the west, and Addison Crescent, which is the road curving to the right on this aerial image here, is located to the north of the site. The application site is a positive building, one of the rare original buildings within the Holland Park Conservation Area. It's originally a carpenter house that was built in 1829 and, as one has observed, has had historic extensions done to it over time. This is the proposed site plan which indicates the areas of the proposed development. The proposed development includes the excavation of the front vaults, alterations to the front and rear windows and doors, the construction of side extensions on the historic extension at ground and first floor levels. I'll provide clarity within this presentation about that also. And also the excavation of the rear light well. It's noted that the works to the front and rear lower ground floor levels do not constitute as basement development. The following slides indicate the existing and proposed plans as submitted within the application. So one can note here that this is the front elevation as existing. This is the proposed front elevation as it would be seen at street level rather than indicating the proposed front vaults. One would note the dashed line here on this side indicates the original building line of the existing historic extension here. Then images of the rear elevation existing, and then proposed. The areas of the two reasons for refusal as identified in my planning officer's report are identified in the front elevation as well as the rear elevation, as well as members should note the residential amenity reason for refusal is surrounding the balcony at second floor level on the right hand side of this elevation. To provide clarity, there are various floor levels within the site. So the historic extension is towards the top half of the plans as submitted by the applicant. So on this particular elevation, the upper ground floor is on the north of these plans, and the first floor on the original dwelling house are considered at the bottom. So the extensions that are being proposed at the side elevation of the site are at ground floor for this bit and are at first floor for this element here. I hope this does provide clarity for members along with the addendum report. I would also like to point out the difference on the original building, especially in relation to the southwest corner, which would indicate the formalization of a rear terrace. And just for members' benefit, here is the sectional drawings, which also indicate the lowering of the floor levels internally. And to provide some visual imagery of the proposed application, here is the front elevation and the rear elevation. This is another aerial image of both the front and side elevations of the application site, where the proposed alterations to the front and side would be clearly visible. And here are photographs of the rear elevation as conducted by a site visit that I conducted myself at the site. I'd like to draw attention to the photograph that's at the bottom left-hand corner, in which you can see the existing platform at second floor level on the right-hand side. It's covered by this foliage here. This is the area for the proposed terrace, just to make it clearer to members. So the recommendation is to refuse the application as proposed in my report. In particular, the openings to the front and the rear elevation would be incongruous and would severely erode this positive building within and the character and appearance of the Holland Park Conservation Area. And the proposed side extensions would almost double the width of the building and also be considered to be a negative impact, contributing to this positive building and the Holland Park Conservation Area. The reason surrounding the residential amenity is concerning the balcony at second floor level on the right-hand side of the original rear frontage, and it would be deemed in this case that it would cause severe impacts to the residential amenities of number 62 Addison Road, which, when one looks at the rear elevation, is located on the right-hand side. So the application is recommended refusal on both of those reasons. Thank you very much. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have at the appropriate moment.
Thank you. As this is refused, recommended for refusal, there are obviously no objectors, so I'd now like to ask the applicant, Mrs. Kamisa, to speak for up to 3 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Planning Committee members for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm here with my husband and we are both joint applicants. I'm Labiba, residing at 63 Edison Road since 2020 with my husband and 3 children. We are honoured to be a part of the Holland Park community and our children attend local schools. Our dream is to enhance our forever home, which over the years has undergone unsympathetic alterations. The house has mostly lost its original charm with altered windows, the addition of ugly shutters, and an unattractive sloping side extension, which is not at all a Kensington feature. Number 63 is even mentioned in the Conservation Area Assessment document that it has been much altered and has lost its original sash windows. Our goal is to rectify these external issues and improve the living space, considering the house's current impractical layout with various levels and awkward and unusable internal spaces. While we respect the age of the house, the extensive damage justifies our desire to make improvements. The house, no longer a pristine example of early architecture, appears unbalanced and incongruous among neighbouring houses on Addison Road. Contrary to the office's conclusion, we believe our proposal will enhance the neighbourhood without impacting others negatively. Our neighbours and amenity groups have not objected to any of the changes, and feedback from neighbours and Councillor Aretti attests to the modest and positive nature of our proposal. To summarise, based on the office's feedback, we've reduced the size and impact of side extensions, created a more sympathetic rear extension with green roof, and restored balance and authenticity of the home by our architects prioritising heritage concerns and satisfying the conservation area appraisal documents. The excavation is not for a basement, but to address low ceilings in our lower ground floor and extend vaults in the front garden. The balcony at the rear has not been objected by our neighbour at number 62, as they have the same feature recently approved for their refurbishment project and hence will not impact living conditions of others. The objection for transport and highways CTMP was rejected, and we respect that and happy to resubmit if required and happy to have this as a condition. We have had no objection or issues with the proportion or the side extension from the neighbour at 14A Addison Crescent to the side extension and relationship with 14A. CL Policy 5, the officer says it won't improve living conditions, but it will significantly enhance our family living conditions as kids grow for the future. CL Policy 3, Heritage, the house is not listed. Our architects have considered heritage aspects and satisfy the Holland Park Conservation Area appraisal reports. Non-critical elements like chimneys can remain as is.
I'm going to need to bring you to a close.
The boundary walls will be restored after construction. Despite the house's mismatch and state, which is barely recognizable from its original constructions, officers recommend refusal, hindering necessary improvements.
I'm going to have to bring you to a close, please. Can you just finish?
We hope you reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from my fellow councillors, please. Who would like to start?
Thank you for coming, and this is an unusual sort of thing to come forward against officer recommendation. So obviously, having to dig into it. Just to help me, did this project start with one idea and then it grew and grew, because it does look like quite a substantial amount of change to the house? Just that little bit of background, just would be helpful to know.
Good evening, sir. The idea of the changes to the scheme were always planned since we acquired the house. So this was originally part of the dream or the idea that we had when we took over the place, was to improve the house as our kids got older. So it may seem like a dramatic and substantial change, but it was not sort of built on over time. It was well thought out.
Any more questions? Councillor North?
Yes, just to go further from Councillor Macker there. It's an unusual one, and I'm familiar with the building. I consider it to be a beautiful building. It may not be as originally built, but was there, during your pre-planning discussions with the council, was there any way in which you felt that you could come closer to getting an officer's recommendation to grant?
In terms of the window openings, I think the design and the ideas that we've put forward are more sympathetic and, you know, work with the recommendations of the conservation area report by removing the, you know, the shutters and improving the sash windows. On the side extension, you know, we're happy to review that if needs be, but I believe in terms of practicality on how we use those bedrooms, you know, we have 3 children in 2 little bedrooms, which make up that side extension, and you know, we believe that it's a sensible scheme for us.
So just to conclude, you believe that there is a way in which you could come closer to what the officers would want to recommend? Is there room? Can we close that gap? Is what I'm asking.
I'm sure it would be possible to close the gap. It would be great if we could get some guidance on, you know, how far we can close that gap. We're happy to do so, of course.
Any more questions? Any questions of the officers, please?
I guess it's an extension to what I just said. The officers, is there an obvious way in which we can close that gap?
There are certain ways in which elements of their proposed development can be achieved, Councillor, but this would have to be done in a separate matter. And I would suggest to the applicant, whilst they have already done a couple rounds of pre-application advice, I think that another round of pre-application advice should be sought to then have those conversations on a formal basis. There is scope for it, but in the way that the proposed development is set out, it isn't in a manner that would neither preserve the character and appearance of the site nor the Holland Park Conservation Area, nor the residential amenities of number 62 Addison Road.
I think also we're having to work on what's in front of us, not what might be. Any more questions?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just about the loss of privacy arising from the balcony, because there's no, I can't. Maybe I'm missing it. I can't see any information. I can't see what, you know, what the actual view would be into number 62. And apparently, according to the applicants, there's not been. They've not said anything about it. The neighbours haven't said anything about it themselves. So I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit more how you reached that conclusion, and, you know, if there was a way you could see that being mitigated without, you know, foregoing the balcony altogether.
Thank you, Councillor. The reason that conclusion has come about is because of the nature of the application site itself. Whilst there is that kind of informal balcony, it is currently accessed by the windows on the site. The idea being of installing a balcony there would impact the residential amenities of number 62. Whilst it is noted from the applicants that no objection from number 62 has been raised in relation to that particular balcony, in relation to policy CL5 of our local plan, we have to give due consideration to both current neighbours and future occupiers of residential dwellings in the surrounding area. And I think, and you know, given the conclusions that I've come to in my report, I think that that wouldn't be met, that good standards of living wouldn't be achieved as a result of that proposed balcony at second floor level on the rear elevation of the main part of the dwelling house. I hate to, you know, be so pernickety about it, but I just want to provide the maximum clarification on that point because of the various levels that the applicants have mentioned as well, given the somewhat higgledy-piggledy nature of the interior of the house.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, then we need to come to a vote. So remember, we're voting on a refusal. So it is recommended that the committee refuse Planning Act permission for the following summarised reasons, and you've got them down there. So those in favour of refusal, please raise their hands. Those against refusals, please raise their hand. So that is, the refusal is carried 3-2. Thank you. We now move to the application without speakers. I'm going to suggest we have a 5-minute natural break and then deal with the application without speakers. Quick 5-minute break, please. Can we reconvene, please? So we now move on to the application on basement flat 278 Ladbroke Grove. Who's going to just briefly talk to us on that, please?
That's myself. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
So firstly, I'd just draw members' attention to the North Addendum report. There seems to be a slight error where some emails in connection with this application have been appended to that. So there are no speakers registered to speak in relation to this application. The application seeks planning permission for the erection of a single-storey rear extension. Officer's recommendation is to grant planning permission, subject to the conditions set out within the officer's report. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions on that, please, from any members? There are no questions then. Can we go straight to a vote? It is recommended that the committee grant planning permission with the conditions listed in section 8 of this report. All those in favour, please raise their hands. Anybody against? Any abstentions? That is carried. Thank you. We now move on to 92 to 96 Kensington Park Road. Who is going to talk to us about that, please?
Thank you, Chairman. That's myself again. So on this application site, we have two applications before members this evening. The first application is for planning permission and the second application is for advertisement consent. The planning permission application relates to the erection of an entrance canopy. This is a retrospective application, and I've just got a photo of the canopy on the slide before members. The officer's recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the recommended conditions. That finalises my officer's presentation, and again, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. On the first one, any questions? In fact, any questions on either of those applications? In which case, then, let's go to a vote on the first one. It is recommended that the committee grant planning permissions with the conditions listed in section 8 of this report. Would those in favour please raise their hands? Anybody against? Any abstentions? We've got that, thank you. Yes. Okay. So let's move to the second part of that, which is recommended that the committee grant control of advertising consent with the conditions listed in section 8 of this report. All those in favour, please raise their hands. Anybody against? Any abstentions? Both those then are granted.
Was it 2 abstentions? And what, did you abstain for the other one? No, I abstained okay. Advertising.
Are you happy with that? Can we then move to the next application, which is St Charles Roman Catholic Primary School? Who's going to do that for us, please?
That's myself. Thank you, Chairman. This application is a council-owned application, which is the reason it needs to be deferred to the Planning Applications Committee. The application seeks planning permission for a number of hard and soft landscaping works, including the erection of new sheds and boundary treatment. The officer's recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions set out in Section 8. That concludes my presentation, and again, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the officers on that, please? No questions, then we can move to a vote. It is recommended that the committee grant planning permission with the conditions listed in Section 8 of this report. Would all those in favour please raise their hand? Anybody against, please raise their hand. Any abstentions? That is granted. We then move to the public house at 23 Smith Street.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for planning permission for the installation of an acoustic enclosure in the rear area, external area to the pub to house air cooling plant. The recommendation is to grant planning permission with conditions listed in Section 8 of the officer's report. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on this application? Excuse me, no questions, in which case then we can move to a vote. It is recommended the committee grants planning permission with the conditions listed in Section 8 of this report. Would those in favour please raise their hands? Anybody against? Any abstentions? That is granted. That concludes our applications and our meeting for this evening. I'd like to thank the committee and the officers for their support this evening. Good night.